Ever get home from a day of, like, making what feels like a million decisions, only to realize that even choosing to do absolutely nothing is a choice.
Right.
It's like we're hardwired to make decisions, big or small,
Right.
constantly navigating this world of limited time resources.
Yeah.
And, oh, let's not forget, willpower.
Oh, especially willpower.
Today, we're diving headfirst into a fascinating topic that grapples with this very idea, praxeology.
It sounds a little intimidating.
It does sound a little intimidating, Ray.
But at its core, praxeology is really just the logic of action, right? It's a way of understanding why we as humans, make the choices we do, especially when we can't have it all.
And before anyone tunes out thinking this is just another economics lecture, I'm hearing you, it's not just about money. We're talking about understanding the human element behind all choices.
Exactly.
From that impulsive online shopping spree to the years of saving for a dream vacation.
Exactly. The economist Ludwig von Mises, who really put praxeology on the map, argued that economics isn't just about numbers and graphs.
Yeah.
It's about understanding human behavior itself. He believed that by starting with the individual, with their motivations and limitations, we could unlock a whole new level of understanding about how the world works.
Okay, so let's talk about Mises' book, Human Action.
Okay.
It's considered a foundational text in praxeology. What are some of the core ideas that underpin this way of thinking?
Well, Mises starts by breaking down the very nature of human action itself, and he identifies a few key characteristics. One of the most fundamental is the idea that every single action is purposeful. In other words, we don't just act randomly. There's always a reason behind our choices.
So when I meticulously organize my bookshelf by color, much to the amusement of my friends, there's a method to my madness. There's a reason behind my actions, even if others don't get it.
Absolutely. And that reason might be entirely subjective. Maybe organizing your bookshelf that way brings you a sense of peace or satisfaction. Praxeology isn't about judging those goals. It's about understanding how the pursuit of those goals, whatever they may be, shapes our behavior.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got purposeful action. What's next on the praxeology checklist?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Because we don't have unlimited resources, whether it's time, money, energy, or even attention, every action implies choosing one thing over another.
The ever-present dilemma of choice.
Right.
I'm suddenly flashing back to my last budget meeting, trying to decide whether to invest in a new marketing campaign or upgrade some equipment. Talk about tough choices.
And that, my friend, perfectly illustrates a core principle of praxeology.
Okay.
Those tough choices, driven by the reality of scarcity, are at the very heart of economics.
Scarcity. Now, there's a word that carries some weight.
Yeah.
So is praxeology suggesting that if we lived in a world of abundance where resources were limitless, economics as we know it would cease to exist?
It's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it? Mises argued that if resources were truly unlimited, we wouldn't need to make choices at all. And that need to prioritize, to strategize, is what fuels so much of human behavior.
It's like those, what would you do with your time if you didn't need to sleep? Thought experiments.
Exactly.
It's the constraints that make things interesting.
Yes.
But realistically, we live in a world where those constraints are very real.
And that brings us to another crucial element of praxeology, uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
We make decisions based on what we think will happen in the future.
Right.
But as we all know, the future is rarely predictable.
Uncertainty. Trying to predict the stock market is a perfect example, am I right?
You're exactly right. And praxeology acknowledges that we make decisions with incomplete information, which has huge implications for things like entrepreneurship, investment, really any decision where we're taking a chance on the future.
It's like we're all playing poker with a hand we can only partially see.
That's a great analogy. And just like in poker, understanding the elements of risk, probability, and even your own tolerance for uncertainty plays a huge role in the choices you make.
So we've talked about how praxeology views human action as purposeful,
right,
shaped by choice and scarcity, and always happening under this looming cloud of uncertainty.
Yeah.
What other mind-blowing concepts does this Mises guy want us to ponder?
Well, this next one is a bit of a game changer.
Okay.
It's the idea of subjective value.
Okay.
In a nutshell, what's valuable to you might be completely worthless to someone else.
Okay, so you're saying that the value we place on things isn't necessarily objective or inherent. It's driven by our own individual preferences, needs, and even quirks.
Precisely. Value isn't like baked into the things themselves, but rather it's determined by us.
Okay.
The individuals making the choices.
Right.
This explains why some people happily splurge on a first-class plane ticket, while others prioritize experiences over material possessions.
Right.
Their values, their choices.
Like that old saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Exactly.
Suddenly, economics feels a lot more personal and relatable.
That's the beauty of praxeology.
Yeah.
And this idea of subjective value is essential to understanding how markets work.
Yeah.
It explains why some products become wildly popular while others flop.
Right.
It all comes down to whether enough individuals value that product or service enough to pay for it.
It's like we're constantly voting with our wallets, shaping the marketplace with every purchase.
And those votes, driven by our individual values, desires, and yes, sometimes even our irrational impulses,
Yes.
create this complex, ever-changing ecosystem we call the market.
Speaking of the market, how does praxeology view something so massive and seemingly impersonal?
That's where it all comes together. Instead of seeing the market as this abstract entity, praxeology reminds us that it's simply a reflection of millions upon millions of individual human actions.
Okay.
Each transaction, each purchase, each investment is driven by those unique goals, limitations, and subjective values we've been discussing.
So it's not some cold calculating machine. It's more like this giant interconnected web of human stories.
I like that.
Each one motivated by different desires and dreams.
And the fascinating thing is that even though each individual is acting in their own self-interest,
Yeah.
the market itself emerges as a kind of spontaneous order. This complex system arises from the bottom up, driven by these countless individual interactions.
So not chaos, but not centrally controlled either. It's this fascinating in-between state.
Exactly. And that's a key takeaway here. Praxeology suggests that the market isn't something that can be designed or perfectly controlled from the top down.
Okay.
It's a dynamic, emergent system, constantly adapting to the ever-changing preferences and actions of the individuals who make it up.
You mentioned earlier that praxeology puts a big emphasis on the element of time.
Yeah.
How does that factor into all of this, especially when we're talking about something as complex as the market?
That's a great question. Time plays a crucial role in praxeology, and it ties directly back to those concepts of scarcity and choice we were discussing earlier. Every action happens within the flow of time, and that means we're constantly making choices that have implications for both our present and our future selves.
So someone who maxes out their credit cards on instant gratification has a different time preference, as you call it,
Right.
than someone who's diligently saving for retirement.
Precisely. Those time preferences are a fundamental part of how we make decisions. They influence everything from the interest rates banks charge to the way we prioritize tasks in our daily lives. Even procrastination is a reflection of our time preference, prioritizing present comfort over future rewards.
This is really making me think differently about how I see my own choices. Knowing that even procrastination is tied into this idea of time preference is kind of mind-blowing.
It's all connected. And understanding these underlying principles of human action can give us a whole new level of insight into not just economics,
Right.
but really every aspect of our lives.
It's like someone just handed us a decoder ring for understanding not just the what of the world, but the why behind it all.
And that's the power of approaching economics through this praxeological lens.
Right.
It's not about memorizing formulas or blindly accepting things at face value.
Right.
It's about understanding the underlying principles of human action that drive the world around us.
This deep dive has really been a wild ride.
It has.
I feel like I need to hit rewind and listen to it all again just to let it really sink in.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Before we wrap up, any final thoughts to leave our listeners with? Something to ponder as they navigate their own daily decisions and choices.
Here's something to chew on. If value is truly subjective,
Okay.
as praxeology suggests, how can we ever objectively measure the success or failure of something like government intervention in the economy?
Whoa, that's a big one.
It is.
Yeah.
It makes you question whether a central authority, even with the best of intentions, can ever fully grasp the incredible diversity of individual preferences and values that exist within society.
So praxeology challenges us to reconsider not just how we make individual choices, but also how those choices interact on a larger scale, even impacting things like economic policy.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of this way of thinking. It encourages us to challenge our assumptions, to embrace complexity, and to appreciate the power of individual human action as the driving force behind so much of what we see in the world around us.
On that note, a huge thank you to our expert for taking us on this incredible journey into the world of praxeology. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and given you a new lens for understanding the choices that shape our world. Be sure to check out the show notes for further reading on this fascinating topic. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep making those choices count.